ahayd dawladda Mareykanka waxay ka qabanaysaa wixii annaga aan dhahno dawladda Mareykanka qabo waa kalsoonidaas inaan isku qabno annaga Soomaali haddii aan nahay waddankan annaga ku nool
And we're joined now by Minnesota Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Margaret.
We have a lot to get to with you, but I want to pick up on where the Treasury Secretary just left off. He alleged that people who were tied to you or your campaign were involved in this broad, brazen scheme to rip off the Minnesota state welfare system. Do you want to respond to that? Do you know what he is referring to?
I really don't, and I don't think the secretary himself understands what he's referring to.
I don't know. Maybe he was referring to this.
Department of Homeland Security linking multiple Democratic lawmakers in Minnesota to an illegal Somali national arrested as part of the immigration crackdown there. Abdul Dahir Ibrahim entered the U.S. in 1995 after being deported from Canada, where he was charged with welfare and asylum fraud. He had been living in Minnesota despite an order by an immigration judge for his removal back in 2004 because of his extensive history of fraud charges.
So let me get this straight. He was kicked out of Canada for asylum fraud, and then he came to the U.S. and he stayed for 20 years after an order to have him removed. Is that right? So either they don't know what they're doing or they wanted him to stay for some reason.
He was finally arrested by ICE agents last week. DHS did post these pictures online of Ibrahim with multiple Democrats they say have allowed him to keep living in the U.S. under sanctuary policies, including failed Minneapolis mayoral candidate Omar Fattah, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, and Governor Tim Walz.
Good old tampon tin, getting chummy with fraudsters.
At the same time, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services is threatening to cut off funding to Minnesota over concerns of fraud in the state.
Now health funding is at risk because the Democrats turned a blind eye to this?
It's true. A Somali fraud ring in Minnesota stole over $1 billion from Medicaid. How did this happen?
Not only did they steal over $1 billion, it looks like they're sending it back to Somalia. And as you can see here, they only earn $500 million a year.
Well, Medicaid programs are run by the states, which in Minnesota means the Tim Walz administration. Governor Walz and the state's other Democrats rely on Somali votes to get elected, so they decided to look the other way.
The Biden-era Justice Department called it the largest COVID fraud scheme in the country. And this was pocketing COVID-era welfare funds, more than $1 billion in taxpayer money that was stolen. It was pretty shocking. Of the 87 people charged, all but 8 are of Somali descent. And that has added to the spotlight being put specifically on your community. Why do you think this fraud was allowed to get so widespread?
Well, I want to say, this also has an impact on Somalis because we are also taxpayers in Minnesota. We also could have benefited from the program and the money that was stolen. And so it's been really frustrating for people to not acknowledge the fact that we're also, as Minnesotans, as taxpayers, really upset and angry about the fraud that has occurred.
Oh, yeah. Feel sorry for the poor Somalis who have to suffer because Somalis ripped them off. And you let it happen. As I just showed, they earned $500 million. They pay about $67 million in taxes. Yet they've made out with $1.7 billion.
So do you think, though, that there was a failure by the Democratic state government to police itself? This is a brazen, fraudulent activity here.
Yeah, and that is what I alluded to in my letter that I'd sent to the Secretary of Ag, was to see where things were going wrong. How can this amount of money disappear fraudulently without there being alarms being set off?
Remember when she said this, do you really think she wants the best for Americans?
waxay ahayd dowladda Mareykanka waxay ka qabanaysaa wixii annaga aan dhahno dowladda Mareykanka ka qabo waa kalsoonidaas inaan isku qabno annaga Soomaali haddii aan nahay waddankan annaga ku nool waddankan waddankii aan annaga tax ka dhiibna waaye waa waddankii gabar idinka dhalatayne ee Congress-ka fadhiso waddanka Mareykankana kuma taageerayo dad kaleete in annaga ayna marka taas ka seexda reer Minnesota gabadhii Congress u dirsateen way idin
By her own admission, she's looking out for Somalia, not you.
And it is something that, we have to continue to investigate. We have to continue to ask those questions.
Because, as you know, one of the initial defenses by the organization at the heart of the fraud, Feeding Our Future, was to claim the probe was due to racism. Do you think that this was all about negligence or that it was like political fear of alienating the Somali community?
So you have to remember that the woman who led the program is a Caucasian woman.
Yes. Blame it on the white woman.
And that was her way of making sure that this would continue to happen by using whatever rhetoric that was available to her.
Stephen Miller said, on Thanksgiving Day, he posted, "No magic transformation occurs when failed states cross borders. At scale, migrants and their descendants recreate the conditions and terrors of their broken homelands." What do you make of this argument of failure to assimilate and sort of ruining America? How do you understand this?
I mean, when I think about Stephen Miller and his white supremacist rhetoric, it reminds me of the way the Nazis described Jewish people in Germany.
Godwin's law says that if you bring up the Nazis, we've already lost the debate.
Yes, of course, ethnically Somali, we are in this country as Americans.
Yeah.
We are citizens, we are productive part of this nation, and we will continue to be.
So as we know, Somalis earn $500 million a year, pay about $67 million in tax, and have sent over $1 billion back to Somalia. And their income is 8.5% of the state average. Doesn't sound that productive. Let's see some stats that might back up this claim. 58% poverty, 42% food stamps, 40% unemployment, 41% no high school education. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Please do all the things. See you next time.